My name is Quentin Williams, and I'm going to be moderating the panel for today. I have the distinct pleasure of being in association with the three individuals who are on this panel. They're friends, and they are esteemed people in the sports industry, in business, and in life. I'd like for them to quickly introduce themselves to you, and then I will start the conversation. And remember, this is a conversation, and we will have solutions at the end. It's a call to action. We'll start with Steve Stowe. Steve, could you give just a few seconds about yourself, please?
Morning, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Steve Stowe. I'm Vice President and Executive Director of the Miami Heat Charitable Fund with the Miami Heat. And I'm really looking forward to today's conversation and seeing what everybody's up to all over the world and our nation.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Steve. And Kim, could you please tell about yourself?
Yes. Hi, and thank you. I'm so honored to be here with everyone. My name is Kim Hampton. I am a former WNBA player. I started the league out. I'm a pioneer of the WNBA, but I currently work as an ambassador for the league. I'm also a vocalist and a model. So, I do a lot of things. I'm a mentor in the game, in the women's game. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us, Kim. And then Brian, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Quentin. I'm Brian Johnson. I spent 22 years in Major League Baseball, 10 as a scout and 12 as a player. I've also been involved quite a bit in the diversity field. I work for a company, a firm, an international diversity firm out of Chicago called the Kaleidoscope Group, and I am an executive consultant for them. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you very much. Thank you to all. How do we get to justice? When I was 6 years old, I finally had the opportunity to go to my grandparents' house after 6 years of being told that I wasn't allowed to do that. My mother's a white Jewish woman. My grandparents on my mother's side didn't necessarily appreciate that she had a black child. So I was kept away from their house. But at 6 years old, they said, you're loved. You can come over here and we will love you. And they became the best grandparents in the world. And on one summer day when I was 6, some neighbors of mine were having a party in their backyard. They had an above ground pool, and all the kids from the neighborhood, there were about 8 of them, were in that pool. And I asked my grandmother if I could join them. I had befriended these kids over the previous 6 months or so. We had all become one community, I thought. And so I walked over there after she gave me my swimsuit and a towel and said, go ahead, have fun. And as I was walking down the hill, I saw the kids and they were splashing and having so much fun. I approached the pool and I was about to get in. And at the moment I was about to step my foot into the pool, the neighbor who owned the pool yelled out my name, Michael. My first name is Michael. She said, Michael, what are you doing? And I said, I'm just getting in the pool to play with all my friends. And she said, oh, no, you can't get in the pool. You'll make the pool water dirty. My grandmother and grandfather lived in a very monolithic neighborhood. The whole town was monolithic. I was the only black kid around. And so I didn't know what this meant. I stepped down from the pool and said, okay, I guess I'll go hang out with my grandmother again. As I'm going across the lawn of my neighbor, another neighbor approaches me and she says, Michael, where are you going? Why aren't you in the pool? Her kids, Kerry and David, were in the pool. And I said, well, because I was told that I'd make the pool water dirty, so I'm going to go hang out with my grandmother. And that neighbor was livid. She was so upset. She told this story to my mother. I purged the story from my memory. I never remembered it. I took over that house with my mother. She inherited the house from my grandparents about 18 years later, and I was in law school. And while I was in law school, I was studying during the summer one day, and the neighbor with the pool out of nowhere was screaming my name in the middle of the street. Nobody was home. I was the only one home. Everybody was working. I run down to find out what's going on. And she says, Michael, help me, please. please help me. She's praying in the middle of the street. So I approach her and I say, what's wrong? She said, it's my husband. He's hurt. He's in the tub. He's hurt. And at this time, I had become friends with her and her family over the course of decades. So I ran to help, and I see her husband in the pool, in the tub, and he had cancer. When he was taking a shower, because his lung cancer spread to his bones were very brittle and his femur just snapped. And he was in the tub, helpless. So I picked him up, put him on the bed, got a towel around him, called 911. 911 came, took him away. He dies 3 months later. I didn't know about the pool story when that happened. I forgot about it. And people asked me, would you have helped him if you knew about the pool story? And I said, well, of course, because if you know my mother, you know who I am. Of course I would have helped him. 7 years later, when I'm 31, my mother tells me about the pool story. It brings back memories that I tried to hide. But now I start to remember. And I think to myself immediately, what would I have done if I had known? And because of my mother, I would have helped him. Obviously, I would have helped him if you know my mother. But I also think about a couple of other things. I think about the fact that when I was 6, I was the neighbor's enemy because she wouldn't let me in her pool. I wasn't good enough to go in her pool. I must have been an adversary of some kind. And then 18 years later, when she had nobody else, I was her only asset. You never know who your asset's going to be in life. I also think of one other thing. The kids in that pool, there were 8 of them. They grew up to be CEOs, educators, law enforcement officers. What were those kids thinking when they heard her say that to me? And how did that impact on their life? What kind of culture was being created on that block? We never know who these children will be. What is the culture we're creating for people? Because this is about culture. In sports, we have an opportunity to set culture. We have influence over children. What kind of society do we want to have with this next generation? That's why this is important. Let's address it. Steve, what is it that we can do as sports individuals, as sports executives, to help this next generation to understand that we are one community? How do we use this platform that we have? And I know you have examples because you're doing something right now that is substantive. Steve Stowe.
Thanks for sharing that story. That's, beautiful story and the lessons we could all learn, just from you. So I appreciate all of you here today. But you're right. This is a platform that we all call sports. As Kim knows, there's so much, pressure in this business to win. And on the court, on the field, it's about winning and losing. Last night, we took a tough loss in overtime at Philly, shorthanded. About 7-8 guys versus 7-8 guys, because this is where we're at right now with protocols. And but it's more than that, and we've seen that recently throughout our country. And I think the biggest challenge that we have is how can we leave footprints in our community so that the fans, the people that live here, see it and tangibly understand what we're doing. And one example of it is our law enforcement training program that we've been able to accomplish here, being pioneers in the business, being pioneers in law enforcement training with it by bringing the Miami Heat and our assets behind it, by funding it and being such a proponent of it. But I think that even more than that, me being at the team now almost 22 years and being born and raised in Miami, I get bothered every day when, you turn on the TV, you look at Twitter. It's a nonstop frustration that we can all have and we all share. And it's hard and it weighs on all of us. And I think that we always say here, we stopped saying it. I'm at the arena, American Airlines Arena right now. It's very quiet here, by the way. Team's on the road, but keep the main thing the main thing, and that's what we're trying to do in this community. I can't really control or affect per se what's going on out of our market, so that's why we look at our backyard and see how we can impact and affect change, like you mentioned, and talk about action. And the law enforcement training program is something that we're just trying to bridge the gap between the community and law enforcement by using our team with it. And we play in the city of Miami, and we've been able to partner not only with the city of Miami, with the city of Miami Police Department and other local heat partners, where they've welcomed us with open arms and said, please, we don't have the platform that you have, so please come to us and let's all work together. And that's what we're doing, because we obviously are in a time where everybody has a different opinion on everything. And I find this is the hardest time to complete action, because right now, if you ask 100 people their opinion, there's 100 different things that are important to that. You're going to find 100 different topics that person is really focusing on at the moment. So I think all of us can come together and figure out how can we all better each other? How can we evolve? And I think that's something that we're doing in Miami currently right now, where we're bringing our platform to the community and basically giving our fans, giving our community so much, because they give to us. And right now they're not able to come to games and watch us. And that's another challenge that we're all dealing with. So I think right now, like I said, leaving those footprints where if you drive around, walk around this community, you may not see it, but the tangible action that's taking place in this community is everywhere. And that's because of this team.
That's great. And specifically the Miami Heat and the Miami Police Department, along with my organization, our organization, Dedication Community, is in this three-headed monster partnership approach, training law enforcement in the Miami area. It is spectacular what you're doing. It's a pioneering effort, never done before in the history of sports, where a sports organization has funded and participated and developed training for its law enforcement agencies. So thank you very much for what you're doing. Kim, what is it that we can do? You've been through it. You've played the game. You're an inspirational figure. You still work in the sports industry in a very substantive way. You mentor people personally. What is it that we can do to address these justice issues in particular in society using the platform of sports?
Well, thank you, Q, for that. And Steve, that was so awesome. Thank you for sharing that as well. But I feel that because of social media, everyone has a voice. I feel it's almost like raindrops, just millions of voices. The platform of social media allows everyone to have a voice. I think that we need to collectively come together, to have some type of organization. I think that we need to have a game plan when it comes to making our voices louder, because one drop over here and one drop over there only affects the people that follow them. And it affects, occasionally, like when LeBron was told to just shut up and dribble. I mean, occasionally we get an opportunity to hear those things. But I think collectively, we need to sit down with legislators, lawmakers. We need to speak to business owners. We need to talk to commissioners, and we need to find out what the underlying reason is for the disparity. We need to ask those hard, tough questions. Why are Black people so hated? And we need to go, because, like I said, us as African-American people, we have always been able to sing and dance our way into a room. But at the end of that event, at that concert or whatever, we have been quickly reminded that, okay, you're cool as long as you stay in that area. Athletes are able to generate multi-millions and billions of dollars for the team owners, for the leagues and things like that. But as soon as someone kneels for something that they believe or something that is right, there is an issue. So I think that we need to go deeper. I think it's wonderful to try and build a relationship with the police and things like that. But I think it's deeper than that. I think that we have to, again, create some type of game plan and just put that in motion.
Thank you. Yes, and you're right. This all comes down to strategy. You mentioned a couple of things, strategy and policy. So ultimately, policy will drive, but we also have to think about the hearts of people.
Right.
We have to strike at the hearts and souls, not just the minds. How are we going to do that? We'll get into that. But first, I want to hear from Brian. Brian, what is it? I mean, you've been in this game for a long time. I mean, you played as a player in Major League Baseball. You've been in the front office in Major League Baseball. You are driven by these issues. This is what you do. What is the thing that we can do using the sports platform? How can we start to develop this strategy? How can we start to address this issue so that our next generation is left with a better situation than we are in right now?
Well, thanks for the question. I think there's a few things going on. One is, I think you talking about historical moments. We're seeing the platforms of LeBron James and other professional athletes being utilized for social justice. So we are head and shoulders far and beyond, above and beyond where previous generations have been. Remember Michael Jordan, as great and beloved as everybody as he was and still is, he did not participate in the social platform. LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, most of the NBA guys are involved and locked in, and they have millions and millions of followers on their social media. So that's step number one. Get the word out there, stand your ground, and be able to be the louder voice. Because when you're looking at the networks that are owned by people that disagree with social justice, they're very loud. So there has to be volume in the message. Number two, we have to be educated in this age of fake news and a lot of disinformation. We have to be educated to be able to handle a conversation with somebody who disagrees with us. We have to be able to know what the issues are. You don't have to give a lecture about it, but you need to be able to handle 2 or 3 questions into the conversation to be able to put your point across and win the argument. So I think we need to be able to compete and win the argument. We do that on the fields all the time. I think intellectually, mentally, as far as social justice, we need to be ready for a discussion or for those cliche answers like your story of a black person going to the pool and dirtying the pool. Think of the impact it would have been if one of the white gentlemen that happened to be there stood up at that moment and said, no, that's not right. Here is the truth. That would have affected all 6 of those other kids in that pool at that very moment. That spreads the message. You don't have to have millions of followers to make an impact. You have to act right now when it's called for. So that's what I think.
Act right now. It takes courage. You are absolutely right. What you just outlined was courage. And courage is a centerpiece for reconciliation. As we talk about reconciliation, what you need to do to get to reconciliation: listen, learn, understand, acknowledge our history, and then take action, and take action with vulnerability, courage, purpose, power, and pain in order to build trust, healing, and reconciliation. Courage is so deeply needed, and it's needed at the point of impact when it happens. That's when we have the most impact, is when we address it head on, right there. You know, the one thing that has been on my mind for many years, since Colin Kaepernick took his stance and sat and then kneeled, is why is there so much vitriol about that silent, that peaceful protest? What is it about it? And I've heard many answers, and a lot of it revolves around the military and the flag. Some of it is around law enforcement. What are your thoughts about that? And let's start with you, Brian. What are your thoughts about the issue of kneeling? Why has it been so divisive, and how can we get past the divisiveness?
Well, I think there's a few things. Number one, I think we're seeing some perspective here now that the Capitol was taken over last Wednesday. We saw a great deal of military people overrunning both the guards and the police, Capitol Police. And so it completely disqualified any argument against Colin Kaepernick back when that occurred. In my opinion, to answer your question directly, it had nothing to do with military at the time. It had to do with spin. Okay. And so in my opinion, what happens is when you have, I think there's desperation for people who follow Donald Trump and who may be who may be racist or maybe want the country to stay dominantly white. They're panicking at this point. Donald Trump's their last great hope or option to try to get this country to turn to the way that they want, to go back 100 years to where white people dominated and were able to control what was being done. There was no very, very little competition for the white male to achieve a job, perhaps, or as an example. Now there's multicultural competition for a job, which is excellent for companies, which is excellent for product in the United States. So that's what's happening. We have to understand this is not the end of the world, what's happening, the problems and the strife that we're witnessing right now. This is the end of a movement to try to contain the beauty of a multicultural United States of America. So this is the last ditch effort. We continue to fight, be ready for conversations, be ready to stand up peacefully, fight with your mind, fight with your intelligence, fight with the research that you do on a certain given topic, and be able to compete or be able to have a conversation to defend your point, defend your turf. We continue to make more strides, and we'll be on the other side of this before we know it.
Thank you, Brian. You mentioned that pool of opportunity being impacted in the minds of some. It's a perception of the pool of opportunity in America being affected by the entrance of other folks who normally wouldn't have access to that opportunity. So just a quick thought. I believe that the pool of opportunity grows when we have more talent. So it's like a pie. Let's get that pie to grow rather than to stay in its finite shape. That way, the slice that folks were getting before, it might be the same in proportion to the pie. It might be the same proportion, but it's so much larger. And we as a country, as a collaborative, we then become greater. We then benefit at a higher level because the pie is so much larger. Thank you for that. Kim, your thoughts. The kneeling issue. You're intimately involved with this stuff. What are your thoughts?
You know, I mean, Brian, gosh, it's like my voice. Brian, I think you said it amazingly well. For me, I don't understand it. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and it's a Commonwealth state. And we all know that Louisville, Kentucky has been in the news quite a lot. And I grew up in a family that pretty much was, on my father's side especially, were pretty much all light skinned. And then, and you had that subliminal message that light skin is better than dark skinned. And then I turned out to be dark skinned. And you know, and I think about all of my family and how they grew up. They grew up, and if I had to really say who they are, they were good old boys. You know, they just followed the flow of things. They didn't stand up or step out or speak up about what was right. Of course, they went out and voted. And so when me and myself, like now going through these times and having a couple of situations where I was discriminated against, you know, I feel angered. And it makes me upset because, again, when you look at what happened, you know, last week with the Capitol, I feel like, gosh, had those been African American people, they probably would have been mowed down with machine guns, literally. I mean, just that bad. And so when I think of kneeling, I just feel that. And when people say, well, all lives matter. We never said that all lives don't matter. And I'm sorry, because I really feel a way about this. We've never said that all lives don't matter. But what we say is that Black lives never really mattered at all. And so that's why we're saying it. So when a person peacefully protests by kneeling just to raise awareness and attention, it's for me, it seems like it's the most disrespect towards that person, because you want to make it about things that it's not, and you refuse to look at what is. You refuse to see truth in behavior that has gone on since the beginning of this country. So I just, I feel that it's just a disrespect, and I believe the fear is definitely in there as well. But it's mind-boggling to me. It really, really is.
And I appreciate your emotion and your vulnerability. We see your pain. And this is what we need others to see. We need others to have that empathy, to be able to step into your shoes, to understand why you are in pain, and then to associate it with perhaps the pain they felt, because we've all felt struggles, challenges, and pain. There's one thing that is common with every human being. Every human being has felt struggle, challenges, and pain. That's our connective tissue. That's how we might connect. And I would urge the audience, if you want to have a really cool perspective on Black Lives Matter, the phrase, I'm not talking about the organization, I'm talking about the phrase, the movement. Check out on YouTube the CEO of AT&T when he gave an 11-minute speech about Black Lives Matter. He's a white male, and he gave such great perspective. It was awesome. Check that out after you get off of this event. I think it might lend itself to a new perspective for you. Steve, you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, kneeling. Hey, Steve, the one thing about the NBA is the NBA has been ahead of the curve for years, going back to David Stern and now with Commissioner Silver. You really are in the middle of this. What are your thoughts about kneeling?
So look, I'm in a completely unique situation. I handle the off the court interest for the team. And, when March 11th took place and the NBA went on a hiatus, we didn't know what to do. We looked around. We didn't know if we were going to have a season. And then thankfully, the season restarted in the bubble. We had, many meetings internally of what we were going to do. And then on Juneteenth, which was the first time that the NBA recognized the holiday, we came out with a Heat social justice pledge. Okay, so then as a result of that pledge, we released T-shirts of our Black Lives Matter T-shirt collection. Now, at the time, the Black Lives Matter phrase really, was something that, people, like you said, people think so many different things. And I can see, like, as of last week, what happened in the Capitol. We realized not only do Black Lives matter, Black lives still matter, Black lives do matter, Black lives always matter. We really get caught up in kneeling, standing, hashtags. And I think educating ourselves is something that, I try so hard to do. So we partnered with an organization, the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, which is a grassroots organization here in Florida that really has citizens, gives them pays their fines and fees to have them vote when they had their voting rights taken away. And that was a part of the proceeds from where these shirts went. And then something that happened over the summer, one of our players, Myers Leonard, who happens to be white, wanted to stand for the anthem. And he was the first player, basically in the bubble that said, look, for whatever the reasons he has with his brother in the military, personal reasons, he wanted to stand. We all met internally. I've spoken to him many times about this. He has our back, we have his back. And I think something that, me being at the organization for 22 years, the gray beard is a little newer than the other hair that I had in the past. The players can look to me and say, look, wherever you come from, whatever city these players come from, however old they are, we've all had different backgrounds. Me growing up in Miami, I can't compare my upbringing to Louisville, Kentucky, but I will tell you what I've seen in Miami is like no one's ever seen. And I know Q and what you've seen and the stories we've heard, we all have our upbringings that, going to school in University of Florida in Gainesville was new to me because I'm coming from this big city. And now I'm in a different town in the 90s where racism was there. As much as, people don't want to admit it, it was there. And it pained me to see that at the time. And now I'm in a position where I have a very, very important position where I talk to our players. We all put our pants on the same way. Like whatever opinion you have, that's okay. But guess what? We're the same. We are this. If you want to kneel, if you want to stand, I think the most important thing is the vulnerability that goes into it, and being confident in what you want to stand or kneel for, but then take action. We all get caught up, fans, coaches, phrases on the court, the jerseys. That's great. I love that people are finally feeling comfortable to talk about this stuff, because I've tried when that terrible thing happened with Trayvon Martin, years ago. We've started these conversations, and I think something that we hear all the time, oh, we have to have the conversation. Let's continue the conversation. Basically, I'm done with the conversation. The conversation to me is extremely old. I've heard it. I hear you, but what are you doing? What is your action piece with it? And that's something that my voice is loud at the Heat. And believe me, you can see how passionate I am about it, because I don't want to continue the conversation. Conversation's been done for a long time, as far as I'm concerned. I want to say we had the conversation. I heard that you kneeled. I see that you kneeled. I see how passionate you are about it. I see that you stand. What are we going to do? Now what? So when it came to Myers Leonard, he pledged over $100,000 to the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition himself and said, Steve, when I get back to Miami, I want to meet those folks, obviously virtual now. I want to help out. Now he stood, maybe people don't know all of the money that he gave that got people to vote in this election, but maybe all they saw was he stood. That was his action. But his action led to another action of vulnerability and courage. So I challenge athletes now and say, please do whatever you want, speak your mind. Like the 19-year-old player of today is definitely, or the 19-year-old who's listening right now is way different than the 19-year-old of 5 years ago. I just started Instagram a few years ago. I'm communicating with people in a different way than I ever have before. I joke around with our players. I'm old to them, and they don't want to get a text from me or a GIF. They want to talk in ways that are action, and communicating to our players and communicating to our youth in a way that I'm in between. I'm not the 75-year-old person. I'm not the 15-year-old person. I'm not the 30-year-old person. I'm in between. So I need to evolve and say, how can I bridge my gap and teach the older generation how to communicate with the younger generation? Because we all come from different places. So when it comes from standing and kneeling, I'm all for whatever you want to do, but do it in what's in your heart. Don't do it because, it's the right thing to do. It looks good. It's the right thing to say. And like I said, we came out as an organization recently, Black Lives Still Matter, because it's like, say whatever hashtag you want to say, but what are you doing about it? So I feel really passionate about it, that we are in a position now. Unfortunately, we don't have fans in the building, but a lot of times I saw in the NFL and other leagues, that player was in the locker room during the anthem, or that play. And I know players sometimes do go in the locker room right before the game because they have to do something, and we shouldn't be judged based on, where were you at this time, or what did you do? Did you hold his hand? Did you hold his leg? Did he stand up? Was he smiling? We're way too focused on that as a country. And I just want us all to evolve in our own bodies and our own voices and use that action piece and say, what can you do now that you did kneel? What can you do now that you did stand? What's your action piece going to look like?
What was great about that with Myers is that this team supported him. The players, his peers, they supported him. They said, we want him to do what we understand. We get it. We want him to do, and we are with him. There was unity there. There was understanding. So here we go. Listening, learning, understanding creates empathy, acknowledging, taking action builds trust, healing, reconciliation. Your team embodied that.
Yeah.
They didn't judge him. They listened to why he was doing it. They learned about his reasoning. They understood it. They had empathy for him. Maybe I would do the same thing they're thinking if I were in his shoes. They also acknowledged their own plight and the plight that he had gone through. And all of that came down to that moment when then action had to be taken. And he took action. He said, this is what I'm going to do. And he built the trust within his own ranks. That began the healing process for your team. I think firmly that was a part of the healing process, which gets us to this place of reconciliation. Black Lives Matter. It's a big phrase, and it's conflated often as a movement. The movement and the organization are conflated because the movement has on its website some things that talk about defunding the police and disbanding the police. A lot of folks have jumped on that, and they've asked for the phrase Black Lives Matter not to be used anymore. But the larger question is, do you believe Black Lives Matter? All lives do matter. There's never been a debate about it, that lives other than Black Lives matter. But now we're talking about Black Lives Matter. Look at that AT&T YouTube video, and you'll have a really good perspective. But here's one way to preempt it all, and the Miami Heat just did it. Black lives still matter. There's no way to conflate that with the organization. How about Black lives do matter? How about Black Lives Matter too? The essence of it is that people matter. They've been told for so long that they don't. But this does come down to action, as you said, Steve. At the end of the day, we've been talking about this for decades, if not centuries. But what is going to be done? What's the call to action? I can tell you, on June 1st, a week after George Floyd was killed, I get about a dozen phone calls from friends of mine who are like family to me. I've known them for decades, if not 30, 40 years. And they're asking me questions about what they can do. These are all white males. They're all CEOs or heads of departments, government officials. And they say, what can I do? And my answer to them is, you can no longer be silent. You have to lead from the front. People have been screaming about this for decades, if not centuries. They've been screaming from the mountaintops. Now it's your turn. Scream from the mountaintops. We're not talking about side by side marching. We're talking about you being in front. Brian and Steve, you are in front. You've been doing this before George Floyd, before the unrest. You've been doing this for decades. What advice? How do we do it? What's the action that we need to take in order to get to that place of healing and reconciliation? Let's go to Brian first, then we'll go to Kim, then we'll go to Steve, and then we'll close it out. Brian, what's the action? This is a call to action. You have one chance to tell the audience what they need to do. What do they do?
Great question. I think it's to, as you say, to scream from the mountaintops, but I would say to make sure you look to find connection. Look to find connection with everyone. And that will allow us to broaden the impact of people who think similarly, but it will also eventually affect the people who don't think the same way. So connect with human beings, connect on this issue, connect for the value that it brings to you, and just keep fighting.
And that connection is exactly what we were talking about with vulnerability and pain. As human beings, we need to be more vulnerable, perhaps. We need to express our pain. We'll have an immediate connection when we do that. That's a great answer. Connect through that vulnerability and pain. Let's show the humanness of each individual. Kim, what's the call to action?
Yeah, I would say that we have to have accountability and courage. And when I say accountability, I mean the people, again, the lawmakers. I mean clergy members, I mean, if you profess to be a clergy member and you are running a church and you are the head of people and you're leading people, you have to be accountable to ask yourself, is what I am doing what God would have me do? I think it's just holding people accountable and just being honest. I think it just boils down to honesty, courage, the courage to be honest, and the courage to be held accountable.
Yeah, that courage, it's a theme. Ryan mentioned it before, courage and accountability. Yes, we have to be accountable lest we repeat our history. We have to acknowledge accountability and acknowledgement go hand in hand. We have to acknowledge our history lest we repeat it. Steve, give it to us.
Yeah.
What's the call to action? What can you as a leader give as advice? Which piece of like a golden nugget that you can give to our audience about what they could do to bring us together using this platform of sports, if necessary?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. One is we all have to stop deflecting, and like Kim said, take ownership and accountability when it comes to things like we said on social media. It's easy to just have a video go viral and point out what's wrong, and that's an easy one. But the number one thing that I would say, the call to action for all of us, I've used this word many times, evolve, but okay, we need to shine a light from ourselves, okay? And by shining a light from ourselves, what happens with that is you're gonna see a lot of shadows when you shine that light. And those shadows are not great influences, but they're around us. And you all of us can probably pinpoint 3 shadows right now that we have around us easily that we need to eliminate from our lives. And they're attached, and it's not them, it's about you. And I think that is the biggest thing, is we're constantly blaming others, and we're constantly looking to others and blaming them why we're not able to educate, we're not able to inspire, we're not able to evolve. But if our light shines so bright, and it's something that your call to action focuses on your own light shining, just realize there will be those shadows around you, and you're not going to be able to affect or change those folks. But all you're doing is, it's a disservice to yourself by not empowering yourself to get better and by not looking at yourself. And I think that on Twitter alone, we call people out all the time, but that doesn't do anything either. It's kind of like the sitting, the standing, how about like just focus on yourself and be a better person for yourself, and watch how quickly the call to action will change with others around you, because you won't be as affected to the craziness that's going on every second of the day. So I think shining the light and being that light, like Brian said, to scream from the mountaintops, be the light that people look to and say, wow, this person is an amazing person. And just realize in that light, there's going to be shadows.
Yeah, there will always be critics. We have to look at, however, how we are going to affect people in a positive way. You're absolutely right. Think about it in terms of affecting you, taking care of yourself and making sure that you are shining that light and you are affecting one person. If you affect one person, you're not really affecting just one person. You're affecting their family, maybe their neighborhood, their community, maybe the city, maybe the nation. You're affecting not one person, maybe 10 people, maybe 100, maybe 1,000. Do that. Do that. We talk about, this seems to be at times, it's just overwhelming. Like, what are the solutions? It's just so overwhelming. These issues are deep. They're centuries old. But there are simple solutions. I would suggest this. And then I'd like to get closing comments, and then we can bring Jeff back on. I would suggest, let's start with one thing. One thing. Let's listen to each other. Let's start with listening. And the listening is a first step in this process of getting the reconciliation. Let's listen, and not just listen. Let's listen beautifully to people. Let's understand. Let's listen to learn to understand and get empathy. That will change the world. Once we have empathy born, the world changes. It becomes cultural. That's my advice. Last closing for everybody. Kim, anything that you'd like to say before we leave this audience?
Along with your listening, I would say that we definitely need to question what we've believed in the past, question the things that have been taught to us, the things that we've learned. I think just question our own truth. We need to question our truth and see if it's valid, if it still works for today. And so see if there's any validity to it that, so I would just say question the truth, self-truth.
Absolutely. Re-engineer our education in many ways. We have to do that. Absolutely. And I'll go to Brian, and then I'll go to Steve to close it out. Last comments, Brian. Anything?
Yeah, I would speak directly to people who lead businesses, preferably not larger businesses, because if one person makes a decision as a leader of a company, that affects the thousands of people perhaps that work for that company, and exponentially it grows to people that company comes in interaction with. So we get a lot of questions from companies as to how they can make a difference, how they can do something different, how they can make impacts. I would encourage them to get behind an effort, say protecting the vote. You got 4 more years to protect the presidential vote, protect people's voting rights. That's a big effort that needs backing. It will show a lot to communities that perhaps don't really appreciate your dedication to the cause. Get behind prisons for profit, so we can get rid of this incentive to put Black and brown people in jail for money for people who own those jails. So I would say, from a business standpoint, again, get involved, put your money. Creating ballparks in the city is great. Don't stop doing that, but also get involved in issues and efforts that will really impact the community around you as well.
Yeah, do your part. Everybody in every organization, do your part, and collectively we can change this thing. Yes, the prison issue is a big one, and we have to address that. We can maybe address that in a separate panel, but that's a big one, because think about all the talent that is being locked up that's not being utilized for the benefit of the greater good, the greater society. It's a huge issue. Steve, close us out with 60 seconds. Anything that you want to say to our audience before we hand it back over to Jeff?
I would say patience right now is first and foremost. I mean, we're in such a fluid time, and everybody really needs to have patience with each other. But at the same time, just come up with questions of how can we do things better? Why are we not doing it this way? Ask questions, the impossible probabilities. Why not? Like, why are we doing this? Are we doing it just because we've done it like this for the past 10 years? Now, if we've seen more than ever, aside from all the racial issues going on, we're in the middle of a pandemic that we've all learned, all of us, including myself, how to get better and how to alter our own lives without going out, without, being around people. So you have to take that philosophy and put that into the business world, but with your own platforms. And whether it's sports, whether it's entertainment, whatever it is, everybody now is very, comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that's the thing, is be patient with this. We will get through all this, and it's about how can we really figure out ways to do things differently, because if you don't look at things differently, the things you look at will always stay the same.
Absolutely. And they can find out more about what you're doing, Steve, at heat.com. Follow the Heat on social media. And Brian, where can the audience find you?
kgdiversity.com.
kgdiversity.com. We appreciate everything you do. Kim, where can people find you?
On social media platforms, that's KYM Hampton, HAMPTON, not KI. And KimHampton.com, all of that.
And Steve, social media, can people find you there?
Yeah, I only do Instagram right now. So I'm just Steve Stowe, STEVE, and I find that a great way to connect with people, and at the same time to really learn what's going on out there and figure out how to empower everybody.
Great. And you can find me at Quentin, Quentin Williams, and that's on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at MQBLW. That's at MQBLW. And Dedication to Community is our organization, dedicationtocommunity.org. This has been a pleasure. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Steve, Kim, Brian, God bless you. And thank you to our audience for watching. Jeff, it's on you, man.
Well, I want to
Take
first
it
of all
away.
say to each of you, I think there's only one word to summarize, and that is wow. We work hard to put together panels and put together conversations and put together segments and individuals that cover from a wide-ranging set of areas. And this conversation was meaningful. I think it was powerful. It was thoughtful. And so truly, on behalf of our team, but hopefully all the people that are watching and viewing, thank you, truly. Q, for your story and your sharing that started off our panel. Thank you for sharing that. Hopefully it opened some eyes so that stories like that never happen again. Steve, your viewpoints across Miami, but across the league and so much more broadly. Truly thank you. Kim, for, I don't think you can be bucketed into any category across all that you do in modeling and basketball and so much more. Thank you. And Brian, you know, not everybody knows this, but maybe they saw when we put out our email yesterday. Brian joined this panel as recently as yesterday, and I think your viewpoint and your experience is so valuable and added as well. So with all of that on a serious and powerful and meaningful note, thank you. On a lighter note, Steve, MVP, man, that beard has a lot of salt and is pretty awesome.
It's my quarantine.
Don't cut it when the quarantine is over.
I know the headshot that you got, that Q, that's what I was realizing. The quarantine taught me I need a new headshot.
I think that's the way to go.
You look great. You look great.
So with that, I think you guys are right. Look, it's not a light switch. It's turning of a dial, and hopefully that will begin in a week, if not sooner, and for a long time thereafter. So really, truly, thank you all.
Thank you.